Hey y'all, hope you're doing well today. I bet you thought I wasn't going to post today, but I can't blame it today on a slow upload. It actually took me just a little bit longer to pull my thoughts together and to finish making my notes. So I hope that you enjoy what I've got pulled together for you, and I'm excited to present it to you. It was fun for me to research for myself, and so let's dive in. So what I did was I further researched some more terms that we typically find that people use when referring to exiting toxic situations, relationships. And I looked into the background of those words and just kind of went down this small rabbit hole and started pulling together a message. And it's just fun to see how a message will come together, just even for myself when I go through this process. It's kind of like if you literally just put one foot in front of the other and just take a step at a time. It's kind of like you may not be able to see, way at the end of your path, but if you just take that step, meaning maybe you just look up the meaning of a word, and then that kind of just sparks another thought to look up another word. And so that's what I mean when I talk about like going down a rabbit hole. It's like just a little bit, little by little, we're just going deeper and actually finding the dots to connect as we go down the path of research. And so it's fun, it's enjoyable, and so that's what I like to do, and I love to share that with you all. So that's what we're doing today. So I started with the word detach, and because we always talk about detaching and detangling, and then of course we have that prefix of D, which is really interesting too. But let's start with the word detach. And my primary resource was the online etymology dictionary. So let's take a look. So to detach means to unfasten, disunite, and then this was really interesting here. I'm always impressed every time I look at these words. It's like, again, I kind of had this general understanding of the definition or a meaning, but then as I start digging, it's like, wow, that's more relevant than what I realized. You know what I'm saying? So to detach, unfasten, disunite, and then this was really cool, especially separate for a special purpose or service. And how many times when you hear of somebody coming out of a toxic situation, narc abuse or whatnot, it's like, you hear the term chosen ones thrown around a lot, and it's like, I think sometimes this is when a person can truly start to understand that there is an actual purpose to their life. And so, even the Bible talks about, people having different gifts. And so when you come out of this chaotic situation, you realize how much you've been spinning your wheels and not really gaining ground on any progression with regards to something, a bigger picture that's meaningful in your life. And that's how I view when I'm talking about like living with purpose. That's how I view it. It's not about like achieving an award. that may be a part of it, if you choose to advance your career or whatnot with a degree, or whatever goals you have in life. I just view those are, just like stones along the path. But just zooming out, again, a phrase I like to use, is like seeing the bigger picture and understanding that there's meaning there, and there is a bigger picture, and there's a reason for it. That's how I view when you hear people talk about, finding purpose in their life. That's how I view that. And so I thought that was really cool, because it's just intuitive, I feel like, or instinctive for us to use that term, detach, to pull away from and get free of the grasp of a controlling and manipulative person with bad intentions. So it's like detaching, yes, but not just unfastening or disuniting, but also, and especially, it says, to separate for a special purpose or service. Right? So I thought that was cool. And if you're a spiritual person, then a lot of times that's when we can reconnect on a deeper level with the divine, and it almost feels like we're at that point where we're ready now. We've gone through this preparation or training to feel ready, maturity wise, with our psyche, you know what I mean, to quote unquote join the army in the spiritual battle. So it's just I thought that was really cool. That really impressed me there. So all right, and then also from the old French, I'm totally going to butcher this word, Destachier, I guess, Destachier. Des means apart, right? And so just keep that in mind, because there is a Bible verse talking about how we are set apart, right? So then I started looking into attach. It's like, well, okay, so that's examining the word detach. What about attach, right? The opposite of that. And I feel like our modern definition of attach is what many of us, again, I don't want to speak for you, but as far as me, I've always just thought of it like the second definition here. I think this was Merriam-Webster, where it says to bring oneself into an association, to attach, or the third definition, to bind by personal ties, like via affection or sympathy. But no, actually on the online etymology dictionary, it says attach it has historically meant to take or seize. Yes, to take or seize. So that feels like it's leaving out the whole compliance part, or agreeing, the agreeance, or the willingness. It's like theft or robbery, which is exactly what it's like when you get entangled with a manipulator, right? A liar, a con, a narcissist. That's what they do, and so and they do that through their lies and their manipulations. So yeah, and then of course the first definition on Merriam-Webster is to take by legal authority, right? Especially under a writ, W-R-I-T. And then going back to on the online etymology dictionary, the old French attacher is to fasten or arrest. So it's it feels that way, right? I feel like that. It's just further validation for why it feels stifling, like to our spirit, because it's like confinement. It's psychological confinement, and that's why it's considered psychological abuse. They're seizing our mind, because every attempt we make at just trying to, just something as simple as putting one foot in front of the other and walking, it's like they're gonna try to correct your every step and just keep you confined psychologically, right? So yes, to fasten, arrest, to take or seize. And then of course the modern definition, the first definition, is to take by legal authority, right? Now here's what's really interesting about this. Authority. I want you to keep that in mind, and we're gonna revisit that. Okay, so I feel like when you're thinking about the second definition here, to bring oneself into an association, because we did have a part in going along with this person, but it was all by lies and manipulation. So had we known, obviously, up front, this person was, had we known the truth about this person, we would not have willingly entered that door, right? Or opened the door for them to come into our life. We wouldn't have done that. But because they snowed us over and faked us off and presented this other image of them while hiding their true selves, right? Because of that, we did bring ourselves into an association, which I'm thinking about the word associate. And so I feel like that's why sometimes one of our first, like, automatic instinctive reactions, like largely unconscious, really it's a defense, is to dissociate, right? Because you've heard that a lot in psychology. It's really interesting to look that up. And that's why, like, I've mentioned the term frozen before, how you feel like you're frozen in a situation like that. Because what's happening is, on some level, not consciously, not in the forefront of your conscious awareness, but on some level, a part of you recognizes that you have in fact been captured, right, or arrested or seized. So that's where it's like, if you feel like you can't consciously, physically exit, then mentally you exit. And that's where you get that whole term of dissociation, right? It's almost like we're retreating into a bubble of security within the psyche. That's how I view this, right? So it is a protective thing, and I do feel like it's instinctive. So this was also interesting, looking at the prefix of des, which means apart, D-E-S, and then D, down from. Again, online etymology dictionary, D-E, down from, down to the bottom, totally, completely. And that's where I feel like that humility has to come into play, where we have to get real with ourselves that, hey, we were fooled, you know, and we ignored red flags, all the things we have to, you know, admit to ourselves. We have to be strong enough to say, I'm not going to ignore, you know, what I see in this person anymore. And so, yes, that's where humility comes into play. And of course, that's the total opposite when you're thinking about humility being at the bottom, down to the bottom, totally, completely grounded, all those things. The exact opposite of that is being elevated, right? Which is what what somebody donning a mask is going to do, right? Okay, so also this was interesting. In Latin, that prefix des, apart, and or d, down from, is representative of the function, when you're thinking about a verb, of undoing or reversing an action. And this is where it gets interesting, because we can challenge ourselves to identify the opposite of their actions. It's like once we wake up and we start to understand narcissism, and we start to see their tactics and all the actions they take, at that point, then we can, you know, look at, okay, well, this is what's wrong and immoral and unhealthy and all this stuff. You know, what's the opposite of that? And that can help us, I feel like, to both frame everything in a positive manner, and we can use those as stepping stones to rebuild our life. And so it's just a challenge for us as part of our path, you know, of growth, continual growth. And then I looked at the term tangle, right? And detangle and entangle and all that, right? So the root or the background word is tagilin, T-A-G-I-L-E-N, tagilin, to involve. This was really interesting, right? To involve, this is tangle, to involve in a difficult situation or entangle. And then from the 1500s, to fight with, right? And then the noun of tangle is a snarl of threads. And I feel like we're always talking about feeling like a puppet with these people, right? And then looking up the word snarl. This is so spot on right here. To become twisted, to rattle, right? Because we feel like our nerves are just rattled like crazy. To growl, and bare or display the teeth, to speak in a harsh manner. So these are all tactics right there. When we talk about being entangled with a toxic person, it's like the definition there of the noun form of tangle, a snarl of threads. And then looking into snarl, that's right along the lines of what we experience, right? And then, furthermore, I was looking into snare, right? Related to snare, which is the Old English and Old Norse. It comes from, or related to noose. Remember in my last video, I talked about the term stage, how we sometimes refer to the circus of life. The Matrix is the world stage, and how it's like it's created by people with bad intentions, right? Who weave this web of lies, this subjective reality, so that they can elevate themselves, right, up on a stage. And then ironically, the other definition of stage is related to the structure of gallows. And so I thought that's really interesting, because snare right? Which is related to snarl. It's like you have these aggressors when you look at the term snarl. They are aggressive, right? They twist everything to become twisted. They twist the truth. They rattle our nerves. They growl. They intimidate us on purpose. They're very harsh with how they speak to us. But really, the snare that they're creating for themselves, or the noose, thinking of the term gallows and stage, it's like the traps that they set for us is what they're going to fall into. You know what I'm saying? Because, and you could frame that in a positive manner and say the truth always comes out, because that's essentially the same thing. That's how I view that. And I believe that. I do. At some point, I do believe the truth will always surface and come through. All right. So if we truly understand these things, I think it will help us to separate ourselves, right? And the term separate is important with regards to freedom from these bad situations, okay? So, and I also was thinking about, what if a desire for justice on some level of our maybe subconscious or unconscious is actually what keeps us mentally bound sometimes? Because it feels sometimes like they just get away with so much, you know? When they're up on that elevated stage, it just feels like they're getting away with everything. And sometimes the grounded part of us being humble feels, you know, lowly in a bad way, you know, because they intentionally try to make us feel inferior. So, you know, we're just working, all we're doing is we're just working these terms, and we're just kind of like making juice. We're just juicing the lemons, and we're just working the terms, and we're just digging and trying to learn, right, as much as we can for our growth, right, for a wonderful, beautiful purpose. Okay, so let's take a look at the term justice. All right, this is cool. The exercise of authority in vindication of right by assigning reward or punishment. Now, I want to take a look at a Bible verse here, Luke chapter 10, verse 19. It says, "Behold, I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you." Okay, so going back to one of my favorite verses, where it talks about, don't cast your pearls before the swine lest they trample them beneath their feet. That's why we have to use discernment, and, you know, not always just be so quick to share, you know, our good news or our joys with people, even if they're, you know, a family member or an associate or a friend, an acquaintance, you know, whoever it is. Because a lot of times when we become aware of narcissism, it's because of like this one main relationship, you know, or like a super toxic work environment, and then you leave it and you get a different job, or you get free of an intimate relationship or partnership. But then you start to, you know, notice these narcissistic behaviors in others, in your associations and connections in life. And so, you know, as you're trying to heal and learn and grow, we have to really take heed with these old directives that have been around forever, right? Not to cast our pearls, lest the pigs, quote unquote, trample them beneath their feet, right? And what do pigs do? Pigs are just constantly hungry, right? They just need more and more and more and more. Like, that's just kind of a stereotype, but one that I feel like is probably very true. I don't know. I've never been a farmer, but hopefully, you know, I feel like that resonates as truth for me anyway. But it's like that they're just constantly, you know, trying to fill that void, that gaping hole, that mindset of lack is just this constant hunger or thirst. And so, yeah, they're going to trample. They're, you know, if you share your joys and your good news, they're going to just jump right on that. So that, my point in saying this is, it's important, you know, it's like, great, good for you if you have figured out a way to safely exit a really bad situation, but just be wary and careful of, you know, others in your environment that may, kind of just create these stumbling blocks along your path of healing and growth. So, all right. Okay. Now I want to take a look here at, well, before I do that, so I looked up the term tread real quick, right? Because it says, talking about the pigs, don't cast your pearls lest they trample them beneath their feet. And then I went back to Luke chapter 10, verse 19, where it says, behold, I've given you authority to tread on, right? Tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you. So I looked up the term tread, which means stepping, which is, getting yourself out of that pit metaphorically, right? And then also it means pressure with the foot, right? Applying pressure. So metaphorically, of course, right? With the foot or a boot. So also it means to pass over and to keep moving. So relevant, keeping on moving. Don't stop and sit down and stay there. You know what I'm saying? Keep on moving, keep going. And ideally we would get to the point where we can pass it over. It doesn't even cause us to pause, not even a pause. We just identify it quickly and we just keep on moving, keep on walking, pass it over like that. And maybe even get a chuckle out of it. I mean, that's a goal right there, right? So, yes, now I want to take a look at 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 14 through 18, and I'll let you read that for yourself. But specifically how it talks about being separate, okay? Because I feel like separating, detangling is so important. So, yes, let's take a quick look here. This is under the section called Be Not Equally Yoked, because it says, Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness? Okay, and so it says down in 17, right? Verse 17, wherefore come out from among them and be ye separate. So we are directed to separate ourselves once we are able to identify these people who operate in darkness, right? We need to come out and from among them and be separate, right? And then at that point, God says, and I will receive you, right? I will receive you. It says, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. Again, that I feel like is a throwback to even pigs, right? Who are dirty. So correlation there too. All right. So that is how God receives us. And it says, and will be a father unto you. I will be a father unto you, and ye shall be my sons and daughters, saith the Lord Almighty. So that's, we have to do that first. And see, if we don't implement those strong boundaries and learn to just keep on moving and passing over these people, then it's going to talk about keeping us from our purpose. It's going to keep us from aligning ourselves with the Almighty. I mean, that's huge. That's huge. So I feel like that's how you can get stuck in a loop of this victim mindset, of just poor me, because you're not stepping out. You have to be willing to separate yourself. And so so that's how I feel like that's an explanation right there of how to be in his presence, right? When we are aligned properly, right? Then I feel like only then will we truly be able to live in peace and identify our own kind, which will also be part of our peace, our life of peace, okay? So it says so in Psalms chapter 16, verse 11, you make known to me the path of life. So first we have to be able to align ourselves with the Lord and be received, right? Before this can happen, I feel like. You make known to me the path of life. In your presence, there is fullness of joy. So that's what we're seeking. We're seeking peace and joy, right? I hope. I mean, I am. I don't want to speak for you, but I am. So, yeah. And then this was really interesting. James chapter 5, verse 13 says, is anyone among you suffering? Let him pray. So there, that's what we're supposed to do. So when we pray, we're directed to do that in private. It's a personal matter, right? And when we pray, essentially, what are we doing? If we're suffering and struggling, that's when we exit the loop of the struggle right there is when we pray, because it's like we lay it down. We're laying it down at his feet. Okay, that's how we're separating the struggle from ourselves. So it's just laying it down in prayer so that we can continue to move forward. Okay, so if you remember the Crescent Moon Bear story when we were reading the book Women Who Run with the Wolves, I feel like, you know, if we can identify toxicity, which we have to educate ourselves on that, you know, even going through it, it's like hindsight gives us a lot of insight, but two, also speaking with others who understand, who have been through the same stuff, and we're all working on ourselves together, and those are our people, and being able to share the wisdom with one another is going to help immensely, right? So that's going to help us to sharpen that discernment, to be able to identify toxicity, right? So just like in the Crescent Moon Bear in that story, if you remember, she was directed by the sage or the shaman in the story, whatever it was, to keep moving, but not just keep moving, but keep moving up the mountain. So we have to, and when she was doing that, just one foot in front of the other, up the mountain, she was singing praise. She was grateful. She had praise and gratefulness in her heart. And I think that's very important too. All right, because it says back in that verse here, James chapter 5, verse 13, is anyone among you suffering? Let him pray. And it also says, is anyone cheerful? Let him sing praise. It's like, why not do both? You know what I mean? So, yes. So I think that's important. And we don't need to be fooling ourselves thinking we're putting one foot in front of the other, and really we're just, you know, at the gym on a treadmill. We're just, so we have to keep guard over our thoughts, because we're directed to do that too, to make sure we're not stuck on that loop there, right? Metaphorically. So it says, I mean, and truly, it may feel, these are my words, it may feel like a mountain at times, but it's okay, because if you think about it, okay, think about this for a minute. This is where we have to really take guard over our thoughts, because even a zombie can walk a treadmill, can walk in a loop, okay? What is required to climb up the mountain, like in the story, the Crescent Moon Bear? What is required? You have to be fully awake. You have to pay attention, okay? Because there's going to be if you're climbing a mountain, there's going to be hazards left and right, you know, wild animals and things you can stumble on, and, you know, even the steepness, you know, if you're climbing up, and you have to really be at your senses and be aware and be awake, okay? So there's a difference, and I feel like we can catch ourselves even monitoring how alert we are as we're putting one foot in front of the other is going to make a difference too, to identify, are we stuck on a loop, or are we actually making progress and walking up the mountain, because it will be more rewarding, right? So I hope that this has given you a lot to think about. I hope it's gotten the wheels turning. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed researching and pulling all this together for you, and making this video for you. So thanks so much for coming along today. I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.